Well, if you missed the start of the program, I focused quite heavily on Scott Morrison's address to the National Press Gallery today in Canberra. That Canberra bubble, boy, are they out to get him. He proved them wrong at the last election, and it was a very antagonistic affair today. A lot of hostile questions, not focused on the issues that are going to affect your life this year, your and my life this year, more on trying to take down Scott Morrison. He, in my view, was way too defensive, basically trying to map out everything he's done and got right and trying to apologise for what he's got wrong, dancing to their tune too much. Here's a little taste of what the Prime Minister had to say.
I haven't got everything right. And I'll take my fair share of the criticism and the blame. It goes with the job.
Let me bring in a former Labor Party strategist, Darrin Barnett. Darrin, great to talk to you on my show. We've often had a bit of a chat on Paul Murray Live. You would have been watching today as a comms specialist. This is a chance for the Prime Minister to set his strategy for the election effectively 4 months away. Do you think he succeeded with this sort of a mea culpa and list of everything he's done during the pandemic?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of Peter Beattie to this, I thought. He was the king of the mea culpa, and it was actually a little bit of a surprise that that was how Mr Morrison went off the top. But look, I didn't think it was a bad speech. I think he was a bit defensive, and when he kept saying this is not a referendum on the government and its performance, but here's what we've done, here's what we've done. So he kind of closed the loop on himself in a lot of ways, but equally, whenever the coalition begins to talk about national security and economic management, they are the strong suits for the coalition. And the more that Mr Morrison can speak about those, the better his chances will be come election day. So, look, I'll come back
to that in a moment, Darrin. Yes, sorry to cut you off, as I'm getting to that. An antagonistic gallery, that's par for the course for a coalition leader. But do you think that his speech seemed more intent on satisfying or mollifying that media gaggle than it was in making a case out to the Australian people?
Look, it probably had three audiences. Part of it was his own backbench and colleagues in that coalition party room. That I don't think there's any real threat on his leadership before the election, but there was a little bit of internal sort of narrow casting of messages that, trust me, I know what I'm doing, I've done it before, it has been difficult, but we can do this together. A little bit about trying to get the gallery on side, but I think, look, we're now talking about a government that if they get another 3 years, they will have been in power for longer than the Howard government. And I don't think anyone really thinks that the current government over the three leaders has been as effective or as consistent as Howard. So they are asking the Australian people for a very long time in office. And I think the gallery's probably onto that. Whether or not the Australian people have paid huge attention over summer, I suspect there are plenty of undecideds. I think we're now, Mr Albanese has said a number of times you don't win the premiership in the first quarter. He's right, but we're now in the final quarter and it's time for him to stand up and it's time for Mr Morrison to put his cards on the table too.
I think you're right. I think the public will be just starting to tune in now after a summer break. You mentioned the strength of getting onto the message about the economy. Again, I agree with you. That's strong ground, of course, for Scott Morrison. Here's a little bit of how he tried to frame that in the speech today.
Our COVID response has delivered one of the lowest death rates, highest vaccination rates and strongest economies in the world. And we remain well prepared for the future. Just like before, it won't be perfect, but the experience we have gained, the investments we have made, and above all, the resilience that Australians themselves have shown mean that we can see our way forward together. We cannot take this for granted. Now is not the time to turn back. It's not a time to have an each-way bet on Australia's future. We must continue to build our strength and resilience and not put everything you have worked all so hard for and made great sacrifices for at risk.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister saying don't put it all at risk with an each-way bet. I think we're going to hear that term each-way quite a bit, coined by Paul Murray, of course, referring to each-way elbow. I want to talk about a big backflip from the Labor leader today. Over the past couple of years, Labor has opposed the government's plan to support a gas electricity generation plant at Kurri Kurri in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. Today, a big backflip. Suddenly, Labor are going to back this gas plant. They just say somehow it's going to be run by clean, green hydrogen gas eventually. Have a look at Albo today.
I see the Hunter as potentially a green hydrogen powerhouse for Australia and the world. Not just producing it here, but exporting it internationally.
Boy, another backflip there from Albo, Darren. Obviously looking at protecting seats there in that region. And look, this hydrogen bonanza that both sides of politics talk about, no one's done this on a commercial scale anywhere in the world yet.
I'm right there with you on that. And it's still a little bit on the never. We all hope it works. We all hope it becomes, commercial on a grand scale. And, on balance, it more likely will than won't. But you're right, it's still unproven. And, everyone's putting their eggs in that basket. I know, obviously, Kurri Kurri is one smelter. Tomago is the other smelter in the Hunter. And, the people who own that, and it's a conglomerate of people, I think Rio Tinto and CSR and some others, that they've stated their intention to head towards renewable energy to run their smelter by, I think it's 2029 or thereabouts, which is a big ask. So it's not just political parties, but commercial operators are also getting on board this big behemoth of hydrogen. So, look, Albo, I think the Hunter's interesting. I think the Hunter's fascinating because the coalition clearly sees a possibility of the seats of Hunter, the old Bob Baldwin seat of Patterson, and perhaps even Shortland, that they might be in play. But I think for every inch they push on those types of seats, there's a bit of a pull factor then in some of those wealthier seats around Sydney Harbour, whether it be Wentworth or North Sydney or a couple of the Melbourne seats. They've got to try and strike a fairly
good point, Darren. Both parties faced with that dilemma with the energy policy, talking to the regions and talking to the leafy city seats. Thanks for joining us, Darren. Really appreciate your insights.